Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I am back with some more Esoterica. Today we are going to be starting part 2 of Isis Unveiled by Helen Blavatsky. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points that are brought to light by the text. As of yet, I have not had an awful lot to add. We went through the science portion, that was part 1, and now we are on part 2. This is going to be handled a little bit differently than we did in part 1, because in part 1 there was a lot to read and not a lot to discuss for me, because it was information that I don't hold too much expertise in. This one is going to be different because I do hold a little bit of expertise in religion. I have spent a considerable amount of time doing comparisons and meditative practices, and I have something that has been revealed to me. There is something that I hold different than most people, and I am perfectly fine with that, but many people are not. So before we begin, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the things that I am saying, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material, so that you can get a better understanding of why I say the things that I do. We're also going to be taking more time in these chapters. These chapters have proven to be quite extensive, and if you were unaware, this is in part vocal therapy for me. A year ago, I really couldn't talk, not in the manner that I am doing right now. My voice is still quite weak, even though the thing that was holding it back has been healed. Right? There was a cyst in my throat. I removed that through the direct manipulation of the electromagnetic forces of creation, which is the Holy Spirit. If that is too much for you, you're not going to enjoy this particular study. We will be breaking these chapters apart because they have proven to be so long that my voice gets tired by the end of it, and that was without me discussing a whole lot. And I expect to be discussing much more in these videos, so we will probably have to break each of these chapters into at least 2 parts, depending on how long it goes. But just so that you're aware ahead of time that we're going to be doing that. I hold several unconventional beliefs, and we're going to outline them right here, as this is going to be the beginning of the new section. I am a deist. I do not believe in the divinity of Jesus Christ. I came to that conclusion through this Bible study that is linked in the corner up here, called the Unconventional Bible Study. That was not the original name of the Bible study. The original name of the Bible study was Lessons from the Book. You can see that in the titles of some of the videos. But over the course, it had to change because I learned a lot of new things. I learned that there was several deceptions in the book, that was at best an amalgamation of a bunch of stories that were used quite effectively to raise up a people from the surrounding peoples and to give them a new goal to strive for. And that's a laudable thing. That is great. But upon review and an honest reading of the book, it became quite apparent that it was not quite right, that there were several contradictions, often within the Bible, within the same chapters themselves, inside the same books. And so it gave me a new lens to look through, right? The same with the New Testament as the Old Testament. There was definitely a message there. You can find God through either one of those, but to me, it is not the most effective way. To me, the most effective way to find God is to turn to Him directly by yourself. There is no need for any intermediary. There is no need for anything to die for you to be forgiven from sin, except for your sin. The only thing that is required for you to be forgiven for any of your past misdeeds is to ask for it. That is quite obvious if you read the proverbial son, or the prodigal son. And so I hold some different views. If you're not comfortable with different viewpoints, this is not going to be the study for you. This is not going to be comfortable for people who have strongly rooted belief in Christianity or Judaism or even Mohammedanism. If those are your strongly held beliefs, be blessed. You're not going to enjoy this. There's going to be too much truth in this for you. I speak with a little bit of authority because I've changed my life using this. I mentioned that last year I couldn't talk in this manner. That is the truth, and you can go back through my videos and you can see that. I had to talk way up here where I do my quotes now. That is where my voice used to be, and I could only talk for about 15 minutes. I had a cyst in my throat. When I made the commitment to this path, to this path that we are going to be discussing, we are discussing right now, when I made that, God allowed me to start taking control of some things, and he allowed me to begin healing myself. Now, some of those have been through guiding me into better practices. I started taking control of my health, for instance, December 31st of 2019. I started walking. That is a story that has been relayed many times, and there will be an update to that coming on December the 31st of this year at the 5-year mark. But my body is in better shape now than it was then. That is in part because of that, but it is in part because of the practices that I have put into place. I spend a good deal of my time every single day in prayer, fasting, and meditation. I don't fast every day, right? That is not like you never eat. That's silly, right? I do eat. I don't eat as much as other people. I'm not gluttonous at all these days. I eat until I'm full and then I let it go. I don't force myself to eat 3 meals a day. I eat when I'm hungry, and sometimes that's 3 meals and sometimes that's 1 meal. It just depends on where I am led. I spend a lot of time in prayer and meditation. However, I start my day every single day praying. When I get up and I drink my coffee and I say thanks to God when I get up. First thing, I'm thankful for my wife and my children, my home and my provision. I am thankful for my crew and the mission, and I'm thankful for the dream and the vision. I am thankful every single day, first thing in the morning. And then I drink my coffee and I go for my little walk. And my little walk, I pray for you, right? I pray for every single person on the entirety of the planet, but I pray for the crew especially. I pray for all of the people that I know. I pray for all of the people that I don't know. I name people that I don't even particularly like, and I pray for their betterment every single day. And that practice by itself has brought me a lot of peace, right? When you pray for someone, it is really hard to hate them. And so I pray for people that I don't particularly like. The course of that has brought me the ability to see things in a little bit of a different light, to be able to shed some of the doctrines and the dogmas that I grew up in. My mom was not religious, but my dad's side of the family was very religious, right? My grandmother was Pentecostal Baptist. She swapped between the two quite frequently and fluidly, and it was a different experience in both of them, right? If you went to the Second Baptist Church and you went to the United Pentecostal Church, there's a little bit of difference between those. And that gave me one perspective, and those dogmas that I grew up with were really deeply ingrained in me, even though I was not by any means a faithful Christian. I grew up and I fell away from the church, and then my wife helped lead me back towards God. That was through Christianity. I have walked through Christianity, and I'm now on the other side of it. That may be a little bit too much for people, but we're getting somewhere. I began this as a way to help people. Right? If you go back to my very first videos, it was the MBTI videos. It was me attempting to help people get a little bit of a grip on their mind. That has helped me immensely. It has helped several of you have come into the comments and let me know that what I have done in the MBTI thing has worked. It has helped you to affect change in your life. It's helped me to walk past depression and anxiety. Those things don't really bother me in the way that they used to. I used to have a quite negative mindset. I used to look at things with a bad spin. That changed. But about 6 months ago, maybe a little bit more, I'm really not great with time, but I made a commitment to God. I told him straight out that if he showed me what he wanted me to do, I would do it. I would follow his direction in wherever it happened to lead. It led us from the Bible study into these esoteric studies. And as a part of that, I started doing more earnestly the things that I'd already seen, right? The things that he had already revealed to me years prior. I've had spiritual experiences. I had an angel come to me and told me I would spread the word of God. He did not tell me I would spread Jesus Christ. He said I would spread the word of God. And for me, at that point in time, that was a little bit ridiculous. It was before I even came back to the Christian church. I have had a spiritual experience where I was pulled out of my body and I saw the formation of the universe. That was during a meditative experience. I was not asleep. I do not have the ability to make it up. Some people do. Some people can close their eyes and they can envision things and they can convince themselves that those things are true. But I don't have that problem. Up until very recently, I did not have the ability to see any particular thing when I closed my eyes. I can't envision a blade of grass. I cannot envision a box. I cannot envision anything willfully on my own. Or I couldn't until very recently. But I told God that if He told me what to do, I would follow it, and that I would take whatever rewards came. I wasn't asking for any specific rewards. I was not asking for any particular path. Wherever He brought me is where it would go. And so some of the things that He has allowed to change my life was me just listening. It was me listening whenever He told me to get off of certain medications that I was on. It was me listening when He told me to change my mindset. It was me listening when He told me to start drinking this tea. The small, still voice that is very much a part of my life these days guides me in everything that I do. I am more and more firm every single day in allowing myself to do that. But a very large part of that is because I believe in magic. I believe in entities. I don't believe in aliens, right? Not in the common conception of them. I believe that the only difference between an angel, a demon, and an alien is terminology. That those entities, however, do exist. Some of them are for the betterment and some of them for the detriment, but they are there. I believe in the manipulation of the electromagnetic forces of creation. Real magic. I believe that you can manipulate within yourself those forces of creation, that you can pull them through the 7 internal chakras and project them into the 1 external chakra and infect change in your life through that. We have detailed that and will be detailing to greater degree soon, right? We are working through these things so that I have the framework around which to build the way to communicate to you the way that I did it. But I have attempted to, through these esoteric studies, through the Infinite Integrations playlist, through the various things that we talk about, I have attempted to tell you that, yes, you can do these things. The healing, the removal of this cyst in my throat was from that, right? Part of it may be because I quit taking pantoprazole. That is a very real possibility, but that was the Holy Spirit telling me to do that. Part of it, I fully and firmly believe, is because of the energy work that I do. I can affect within myself, and I have affected other people. I have pushed my energy and healed other people in some very real ways. I have healed animals in some very real ways, and I have healed myself in some very real ways. I removed the cyst. Now, I could, most likely, do a complete work on my throat and make it happen where I could talk in a normal way, but I'm willing to wait on God's timing for that. If He tells me to do that, then I will. But the way that I did the cyst removal was not me going in and saying, remove this cyst, remove this cyst. It is the energy that I allow to move within myself. And I just set the energy in my throat chakra where it needed to be for however long He led me to do it. And then one day it just disappeared. It was gone. I still rest that energy there. I still do that. I healed this shoulder. If you're unfamiliar, this is the first video you stumbled across. I had an accident at work 2 decades ago where I had 2 surgeries on this shoulder. They shaved my clavicle, they moved the tendon around, and they tightened up my shoulder and did a lot of things, but I only got 80% functionality out of my shoulder. I now have 100%. I can do anything with this shoulder that I can do with this shoulder. And while my strength is not where it was when I was 20, it is a lot better than it was a year ago. That is, again, from resting the energy in my heart chakra. I am affecting change in different parts of my life. If you were unaware, because this is your first video, I was in a car wreck. I was rear-ended on the interstate, and it led to severe injuries. I have 7 bulging discs, 6 herniations, and 3 spinal impingements, spinal stenosis, degenerative disc disorder, and scoliosis, all as a result of this wreck. Over the course of the last 6 months, a lot of that is gone as well. Am I 100%? No, not yet, but it's coming. I'm right on the edge of it, and this is going to be part of the update on the 31st. I can do things now that I could not do a year ago. That is because of what I do. So when I am here telling you that My view on religion has allowed me to change my life. I really mean that. I cried because I could sing in my own voice. I cried because I can move in ways that I have not been able to do for over a decade. My car wreck was in 2011. I have been injured since 2011, and my life is different now. I just told you about the aphantasia, right? That is the terminology for not being able to envision things in your mind. I'm healing that. For the first time ever in my life, I am able to see things when I close my eyes. Now, as of yet, those things are not willful for the most part. I can change colors. I can see colors for the first time ever. If I close my eyes in a meditative state, I can pull up the color red in the appropriate chakra and make it do the things that it needs to do, because it's supposed to rotate and glow and do all of those things. A year ago, I could not do that. I can change that yellow or that red into orange, and then into yellow, and then into green. I can change the color for the first time in my life, and that is because of the things that I am doing and I am telling you about. I can now close my eyes in a meditative state and have, not visions, that's not the right word, but images, right? There's no real cohesion to them as far as I can tell right now, but for the first time, I saw a face when I close my eyes. And part of that may be because I am opening myself up to these entities. That may be a little bit too much for people too, but I am quite cautious. If you are unfamiliar, you should definitely check out the Infinite Integrations playlist, but I'm quite cautious about that. There's a reason, and here it is. You don't know who you're dealing with. There are forces that are good, and there are forces that are evil, right? Those are relative terms for the most part, but absolute good and absolute evil do exist. And there are forces that work for the betterment of mankind. They come and they help. And there are forces that work for the detriment of mankind, and they come and they hurt. Any time that there is a blood sacrifice required, you are dealing with the wrong entity. Every single time, I stand on that with both feet. If you feel fear, you're dealing with the wrong entity. But here's the key problem with dealing with entities. While there are entities that are aligned with good, they can't lie to you, right? The good entities, they cannot lie to you. They are bound by law. They cannot lie to you. But the ones on the other side, they absolutely can, and they do extensively. They mislead, they guide in the wrong direction all the time, and you can't tell the difference. There are signals, right? You can, if you're paying enough attention, tell the difference between the good and the bad. But if you're not guarded in the right way, if your shields are not strong enough, if you have not set your intentionality in the right manner, those entities can lie to you. And those entities that are working for the detriment of mankind, they can convince you that you're doing the right thing. They can tell you to take your child and put him on an altar and stab him through the heart. They can do that. And some people will believe that. And then sometimes them other entities will pop up and they will tell you, whoa, wait, what are you doing? That is your child. Don't kill your child. Here, take this ram and do it instead. You don't have to sacrifice anything alive in order for you to be forgiven from sin. And that has never been the case. And that is the major point of contention that you are going to hold from me if you are subscribing to any of the Judeo-Christianic religions, or even the Mohammedan ones. If you believe that anything has to die in order for you to be forgiven from your sins, you're not going to enjoy this study. I say all of that to say that I am here to reveal things. I am here because of the experiences that I have had. I am here because I have been able to heal myself. It is the direct allowance of God, right? I try to work within the will of God, so I say that it is the will of God. But He has allowed me to move the energy. He has told me in no uncertain terms that if I do these things, I will be able to affect change in my life, and it has worked. I have the fruits of the Spirit. I have love surrounding me. Me and my wife love each other deeply. Me and my children have a wonderful relationship. The people who are in my life have seen the fruits of what God has done in my life. Fruits that other places don't allow you to get. If you are putting off onto someone else the responsibility for changing your life, you're doing it wrong. That is some of the things that I am here to reveal, right? I'm here to tell you about things. I'm not here to convince you of them. That's a little bit hard for some people. It seems awfully prideful, but I promise you that I am walking as best I can in humility, right? I could very well be making myself rich off of this. I could go and make the circuit. I could lie to people and tell them that it was because of things that they believe. I could go to these Baptist churches and say, Jesus Christ, allow me to do. No, I can't do that because of the deal that I made with my God. God told me that there was no need for any intermediary between me and him, that I could go directly to him and get forgiveness for any sins that I might commit. And I firmly and fully believe that. And because of that, I've been allowed to change my life. I've been allowed to remove the cyst from my throat, to heal my shoulder, to effect change in other places. I'm on day 6 of no trembles. That is amazing to me. You know what it's like for 11 years to have one entire side of your body just do whatever the hell it wants? Like, for real, like, I'm so used to it that I don't even really notice anymore. But whenever I meet somebody new, or did up until recently, I would meet them and then we would be talking, and then all of a sudden my hand would do like this. And then that's a real thing. Like, my legs do it, my eyes do it, my scalp will do it, or did. And you would get the reinforcement then that, hey, something's not quite right. That is gone. That is one of the things that have been healed in me. I am affecting change in my life through the things that we are talking about. This is an extra long intro. This is a lot of backstory, and we're about to dive into the beginning of this study, but we had to lay this out first so that you understand I am not just doing this to piss you off. I hold some unconventional beliefs, and I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those beliefs. It is not intentional, but it is not something that I apologize for, because I have to stand on the things that I know. I am open to being corrected, but you can't come at me with the same arguments. I don't believe Jesus was divine. I believe that he walked the earth. I believe that he performed miracles. I believe that he died on a cross. I even believe that he was able to be risen again. That was not exclusive to him. But it is entirely possible that that was pulled wholesale from somewhere else. There is significant reason to believe that. We've already been through that in part when we went through the science part of this particular study. This is the religious part. This is the part where it's going to be getting into detail. And while this is an extra long intro, this will not be normal for this. I will be talking about these things as we go along. So if any of that has offended you, if any of that sets you off and makes you get in a tizzy, this is not going to be the study for you. I'm not here to be corrected. I know that sounds awfully headed, but my correction comes from somewhere else. My correction comes from somewhere else. You're not going to come at me, well, did you ever consider dispensation? Yes, I have. I spent an awful lot of time considering. I have sought any way possible for me to go on the other path because it is so much easier. It really would be a whole lot easier for me personally if I could do the normal thing. If I could tell you that if you do this, like it is told to you in the Southern Baptist Church, that would be so much easier for me. On a personal and a professional level, it would be easier for me. I'm not here for easy. I'm here to walk in truth wherever that truth may lead. And the truth so far has led me to this. God is absolutely real. 100%. I have zero doubt. But anything that you have ever placed your eyes on or ever will be able to place your eyes on cannot be God. I believe in a Trinity. And we're going to outline that right here again. This is an extra long intro. The Trinity is this. This is the temple of God. You are the soul that resides in the temple of God. The temple of God is how you navigate 5D space. And you, the individualized piece of God who is here on a voluntary basis in order to learn lessons, gets to navigate through 5D space with this temple. But you making the decisions doesn't actually make those decisions happen. That is the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is the third part of the Trinity, and it is the electromagnetic forces of creation. It is literally every single atom in existence and all those spaces between those atoms. It is literally every single thing ever. Everything that you can put your eyes on and everything that you cannot put your eyes on is the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit takes the now and changes it into the next. Without the Holy Spirit, there is no movement. Your food doesn't get digested and turned into fuel. Your oxygen does not get dispensed to your fingertips. And when you decide to wiggle your fingertips, the Holy Spirit actually makes that happen. It is the electromagnetic forces of creation. It is the interaction between those atoms. It is all of that in one. The Holy Spirit and the plasma that makes up all of reality is God. And you can take a small measure of control of that. You can move that energy up and down within yourself through your spinal cord to the various points where it needs to be. You can do that in the same way that I have done that. I fully and firmly believe all of that. And if any point of that was too much for you, again, this is not going to be the study for you. Now, how is this going to differ from the rest of the chapters? It's because it's long, and I'm going to have to take breaks. That's something that I don't really like to do. I like to go through in one sitting. Sometimes, so far, I've had to stop and go to the bathroom because they turned out it was 3 hours long. And the fact that I can talk for 3 hours is one of the blessings that lets me know that I'm on the right path. Not just to be able to talk, but to be able to use different parts of my voice. I could not talk in this tone of voice at all 6 months ago. A year ago, I was way up here. And then I slowly got this part, and this part is doing really well. But this is the bottom end of my voice, and I can talk right here. I just can't do it really long. All of this is the proof that my God lives, that my God has got me on the right path. And that path is a little bit different, and I'm not here to change your path. I'm here to let you know that this path exists. And not only does it exist, that you can walk it if you choose to. You can stay on the path of somebody else forgiving you for your sin. You can stay on the path of somebody else having to intercede for you in prayer. Somebody else having to intercede for you in healing. You can stay on that path. But this path is for the ones who are not content with that. There's a lot of people out there who are seeking this alternative path. This path leads directly to God. There is no intermediary between me and my God. There is nobody standing between me and God. Not even Jesus. Jesus is a wonderful tool. We talk about tools quite often over here. Jesus is a tool just as much as these crystals on this shelf behind me are. They can do wonderful things if you allow them to, but none of them are necessary. They help sometimes in certain situations, but they're not necessary. There's a significant difference between needed and necessary. I believe that Jesus was needed, that it was his life that really allowed people to understand that animal sacrifice was pretty horrible. I personally don't believe that God set up animal sacrifice. I believe that was those other entities. God requires you. And that is it. And so, with all of that being said, if you are still here, we're going to dive into this, and we'll have to take several breaks. I don't like doing that, but that is the format this is going to have to fall out in, because I'm already 30 minutes in, just giving you the backside, the back history, the reason for all of this. And my voice, it's going to give out. It's not 100%. I don't claim to be at 100%. I do claim to be a lot better. And that is directly because of this path. With that being said, I'm going to find my glasses and we're going to dive into this. So, all right. Isis Unveiled, Part 2, Chapter 1, Religion. Yea, the time cometh that whosoever killeth you will think that he doeth God service. The Gospel according to John. Let him be anathema who shall say that human sciences ought to be pursued in such a spirit of freedom that one may be allowed to hold as true their assertions, even when opposed to revealed doctrines. The Ecumenical Council of 1870. I am anathema, I guess. The Church, where is it? King Henry the VI. In the United States of America, 60,428 men are paid salaries to teach the science of God and his relations to his creatures. These men contract to impart to us the knowledge which treats of the existence, character, and attributes of our Creator, his laws and government, the doctrines we are to believe, and the duties we are to practice, 5,141 of them, with the prospect of 1,273 theological students to help them in time teach this science according to a formula prescribed by the Bishop of Rome to 5 million people. 55,287 local and traveling ministers representing 15 different denominations, each contradicting the other upon more or less vital theological questions, instruct in their respective doctrines 33,500,000 other persons. Many of these teach according to the canons of the cisatlantic branch of an establishment which acknowledges a daughter of the late Duke of Kent as its spiritual head. There are many 100,000 Jews, some thousands of Orientals of all kinds, and very few who belong to the Greek Church. A man at Salt Lake City with 19 wives and more than 100 children and grandchildren is the supreme spiritual ruler over 90,000 people who believe he is in frequent intercourse with the gods. For the Mormons are polytheists as well as polygamists, and their chief god is represented as living in a planet they call Kolob. We're going to pause right here, I know, and we're going to talk real quick. The number one reason why most people fall out of theological seminaries is because they come to the truth of what is contained in the Bible. Now, if you are unfamiliar, I have done a Bible study. There's 161 videos where we detail in extensive detail how I fell away from Christianity. It's because I read the book. I read the book without the lie that there is a chosen people. God can choose a person. That is because of faithful service. God chooses a person, but he doesn't choose a people. People are fickle. They do not follow in perfect uniformity. You can choose to follow God, but your neighbor probably won't. We also took off the lens that this particular people had to be chosen because they had to have this particular sacrifice in order to be forgiven from sin. I don't believe that at all. There is no need for an intermediary between you and God. There is no animal sacrifice required for you to be forgiven from sin. And we discovered that in that Bible study. We went through in extreme detail Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Numbers. We read all of the begots. We talked about the things that were contained in that book. And in every single book inside of that book, because it is a bunch of books together, not meant to be one narrative discourse, but instead a whole bunch of histories placed together. In every single one of those chapters, it turns out that you do not need an animal sacrifice to be forgiven from sin. It is told to you in every single one of those chapters in at least one place. Therefore, if you can be forgiven from sin without anyone having to die, guess what? Nobody had to die for you to be forgiven from sin, and that is a major problem. But if you read the book honestly, it is an unmistakable fact. And the problem with theological seminaries is that they teach you how to think about it. They teach you how to apologize for it. They teach you the arguments to make when the questions arise. And for many people, that's not enough. More people begin theological seminaries than actually graduate from them, and that is the reason why. It is, in some cases, an academic problem. Some people just cannot keep up. That is going to be a fact in every single course of study. Some people are going to fall out from that. Some people are going to read that and they're going to be like, well, that doesn't make sense. Let me ask. And then they get the answer and they're like, that doesn't make sense either. And then they fall out. That is the main reason why people leave. Most people who do not finish theological seminaries wind up not following the religion that they were originally a part of. That is the truth. I am becoming more and more convinced Not that the average person who is a part of these religions, but those people who represent the religions fall into two categories. The first category is the ones that are a little bit slightly behind, right? They don't have the ability to critically think, and you can become quite successful and not be able to critically think. We have several examples of that in billionaires these days. But I believe that fully a good, significant portion of those who go about the daily work of the churches fall into that category. They were raised in this. They have had this doctrine ingrained in them, and they never even question it. They don't have the ability to question it. That is most of the people who go about the preaching on a daily basis. And then the second half of that are those who know. And they tell you the opposite anyway. This is the Joel Osteens of the world. This is the Kenneth Copelands of the world. These prosperity gospel teachers who are telling you this, and they are living something different. Those people, they have a faith, right? But they have a faith in something other than God. They have a faith outside of. You, however, you can be brought to a knowledge of God through somebody who is unqualified, through somebody who doesn't know anything, through somebody who is intentionally deceiving you, because God will meet you where you are. But you can judge them by their fruits. Right? You can, and we're not going to get into the extreme details of that. But those are the two types of preachers out there. The ones who can't keep up and the ones who know and are deceiving you. And I am becoming more and more firmly convinced of that the more that I study. The more that we read these books and we see these things and know, right, we're about to get into this. This is 1877. She knew then what I am telling you now. And it is not going to be accepted any more now than it was then, but that's okay. I'm not here for everybody. I'm here for somebody. I'm here for whoever wants to come. I am open to anyone, but everybody's not going to come, and that is perfectly fine. God will meet you where you are. You can find God in the Roman Catholic Church, but it is exceedingly difficult. You can find God in the United Pentecostal Church, but again, it is exceedingly difficult. There are various reasons for that, and I'm hoping that we're going to get into those as we go further along. But as we are talking about the doctrines and the seminaries and the different people who are out here representing God, it is important to realize that there are only two types of people out there doing this. And that is not to say that those who fully and firmly believe in these things are evil, right? They don't realize the control system under which they are operating. And that is a significant problem. You don't understand the thing in which you talk about. I'm here to shed a little light, but again, it is not for everyone. I want it to be, right? Then don't get that twisted at all. It would be wonderful if everybody would get to a direct knowledge of God. That would be the best outcome for everyone. But once again, that is an exceedingly difficult target to hit. People don't want to. The God of the Unitarians is a bachelor. The deity of the Presbyterians, Methodists, Congregationalists, and the other Orthodox Protestant sects, a spouseless father with one son, who is identical with himself. In the attempt to outvie each other in the erection of their 62,000 and odd churches, prayer houses, and meeting halls, in which to teach these conflicting theological doctrines, $354,485,581 have been spent. That is an awfully specific number. The value of the Protestant parsonages alone, in which are sheltered the disputants and their families, is roughly calculated to approximate $54,115,297. $16,179,387 are, moreover, contributed every year for current expenses of the Protestant denominations only. One Presbyterian church in New York cost a round $1,000,000. A Catholic altar alone, 1/4 as much. We will not mention the multitude of smaller sects, communities, and extravagantly original little heresies in this country which spring up one year to die out the next, like so many spores of fungi on a rainy day. We will not even stop to consider the alleged millions of spiritualists, for the majority lack the courage to break away from their respective religious denominations. These are the backdoor Nicodemuses. And now, with Pilate, let us inquire, what is truth? Where is it to be searched for amid this multitude of warring sects? Each claims to be based upon divine revelation, and each to have the keys of the celestial gates. Is either in possession of this rare truth? Or must we exclaim with the Buddhist philosopher, there is but one truth on earth, and it is unchangeable, and this is that there is no truth on it. Though we have no disposition whatever to trench upon the ground that has been so exhaustively gleaned by those learned scholars who have shown that every Christian dogma has its origin in a heathen rite, still the facts which they have exhumed, since the enfranchisement of science, will lose nothing by repetition. I'm going to go ahead and pause here too. Right? This right here, that every Christian dogma has its origin in a heathen rite, that is true. You may not be aware, but Easter and Ishtar, the exact same word. According to the Bible, right, it is the exact same word, Easter and Ishtar. Esther, Easter, and Ishtar. There's a significant lesson to learn in that if you read the book of Esther. On top of that, we have Yule. Yule and Christmas have become synonymous, but they're not. It is almost certain that if the Bible were true, Jesus was born in the springtime, not the fall. Definitely not the winter. Definitely not the solstice of the winter. But one of the key things that we do as a society is a Christmas tree. And if you are unfamiliar, I'm again going to refer you to the Bible study. It is expressly denied any believer in Yahweh Elohim to bring a tree into their house and to decorate it with lights. That is expressly denied to anyone who is to follow Yahweh Elohim. What do we do every single Christmas? We buy trees and we bring them into our house. The very kind that we are not allowed to do, the evergreen tree. We decorate it with lights and then we place gifts underneath it. And we claim that it is because of Jesus, and that is not true. It is because Yule was a thing in Europe. The Celtics practiced it. And in order to bring the Celtics into the Catholics, they assimilated it. They took their ceremonies and made it part of theirs. They did the same thing with Isis and Easter. There's nothing about a rabbit or an egg that has anything to do with Christ. It, however, does have a lot to do with Ishtar. Those things are just two examples of this dogma having its origin in heathen rite. There are many more examples. We have already gone through several of them in the science portion of this particular study, and I am sure we will have more to talk about. They may even bring up the same points that I just did, but those are important, and in case they are not brought up, we're going to talk about it because it was brought forth by the light. Right now, it is December 6th of 2024. You may be watching this in 10 years in the middle of the spring, but right now, everybody is setting up those trees in their house, and they are calling themselves Christian. And that is funny to me. Like, if you don't even understand your own religion, then what are you even doing? And that is the reality. That is the reality of most people. They are perfectly fine with the dogma. They are perfectly fine with the rites and the things that are being brought to them through history. I firmly stand that just because it has been there for a long time doesn't mean it's correct. We used to think that the earth was flat. There is no way that the earth is flat. You can do the experiments yourself. We used to believe that there was a firmly attached firmament and that you could not send anything through it, but that again is not true. Is there a firmament? Yes, it is a separation between the waters below and the waters above. That's a real thing. You know what it is? It's our atmosphere that separates the waters of space from the waters of the deep. And the waters that we breathe is the actual firmament in between. That is held in place by the direct will of God, but that doesn't mean that you cannot penetrate it. You are held away from the waters below, but you can dive in. It is the exact same with the waters above, and if you don't understand that, I can't make you, but I can tell you about it. I'm not here to convince you. I'm here to let you know. Besides, we propose to examine these facts from a different and perhaps rather novel point of view, that of the old philosophies as esoterically understood. These we have barely glanced at in our first volume. We will use them as the standard by which to compare Christian dogmas and miracles with the doctrines and phenomena of ancient magic, and the modern new dispensation, as spiritualism is called by its votaries. Since the materialists deny the phenomena without investigation, and since the theologians, in admitting them, offer us the poor choice of two palpable absurdities, the devil and miracles, we can lose little by applying to the theurgist, and they may actually help us to throw a great light upon a very dark subject. Professor A. Butleroff of the Imperial University of St. Petersburg remarks in a recent pamphlet entitled Mediumistic Manifestations as follows: "Let the facts of modern spiritualism belong, if you will, to the number of those which were more or less known by the ancients. Let them be identical with those which in the Dark Ages gave importance to the office of Egyptian priest or Roman augur. Let them even furnish the basis of the sorcery of our Siberian shaman. Let them be all these, and if they are real facts, it is no business of ours. All of the facts in nature belong to science, and every addition to the store of science enriches instead of impoverishing her. If humanity has once admitted a truth, and then, in the blindness of self-conceit, denied it, to return to its realization is a step forward and not backward. Since the day that modern science gave what may be considered the death blow to dogmatic theology by assuming the ground that religion was full of mystery, and mystery is unscientific, the mental state of the educated class has presented a curious aspect. Society seems that from that time to have been ever balancing itself upon one leg, on an unseen tightrope stretched from our visible universe to the invisible one, uncertain whether the end hooked on faith in the latter might not suddenly break and hurl it into final annihilation. The great body of nominal Christians may be divided into three unequal portions: materialist, spiritualist, and Christians proper. The materialist and spiritualist make common cause against the hierarchical pretensions of the clergy, who, in retaliation, denounce both with equal acerbity. The materialists are as little in harmony with the Christian sects themselves, the Comtists, or, as they call themselves, the Positivists, being despised and hated to the last degree by the schools of thinkers, one of which Maudsley honorably represents in England. Positivism, it may be remembered, is that religion of the future about whose founder even Huxley has made himself wrathful in his famous lecture, The Physical Basis of Life, and Maudsley felt obliged, in behalf of modern science, to express himself thus: "It is no wonder that scientific men should be anxious to disclaim Comte as their lawgiver, and to protest against such a king being set up to reign over them, not conscious of any personal obligation to his writings, conscious how much, in some respects, he has misrepresented the spirit and pretensions of science. They repudiate the alliance which his enthusiastic disciples would force upon them, and which popular opinion is fast coming to think a natural one. They do well in thus making a timely assertion of independence, for if it not be done soon, it will soon be too late to be done well." When a materialistic doctrine is repudiated so strongly by two such materialists as Huxley and Maudsley, then we must think indeed that it is the absurdity itself. Among Christians there is nothing but dissension. Their various churches represent every degree of religious belief, from the omnivorous credulity of blind faith to a condescending and high-toned deference to the deity, which thinly masks an evident conviction of their own deific wisdom. All these sects believe, more or less, in the immortality of the soul. Some admit the intercourse between the two worlds as fact. Some entertain the opinion as a sentiment. Some positively deny it. And only a few maintain an attitude of attention and expectancy. Impatient of restraint, longing for the return of the Dark Ages, the Romish Church frowns at the diabolical manifestations and indicates what she would do to their champions had she but the power of old. Were it not for the self-evident fact that she herself is placed by science on trial and that she is handcuffed, she would be ready at a moment's notice to repeat in the 19th century the revolting scenes of former days. As to the Protestant clergy, so furious is their common hatred toward spiritualism, that as a secular paper very truly remarks, they seem willing to undermine the public faith in all the spiritual phenomena of the past as recorded in the Bible, if they can only see the pestilent modern heresy stabbed to the heart. Summoning back the long-forgotten memories of the Mosaic laws, the Romish Church claims the monopoly of miracles and of the right to sit in judgment over them as being the sole heir thereto by direct inheritance. The Old Testament, exiled by Colenso, his predecessors and contemporaries, is recalled from its banishment. The prophets, whom His Holiness the Pope condescends to at last to place, if not on the same level with himself, at least at a respectful distance, are dusted and cleaned. The memory of all the diabolical abracadabra is evoked anew. The blasphemous horrors perpetrated by paganism, its phallic worship, thaumaturgical wonders wrought by Satan, human sacrifice, incantations, witchcraft, magic, and sorcery are recalled, and demonism is confronted with spiritualism for mutual recognition and identification. Our modern demonologists conveniently overlook a few insignificant details, among which is the undeniable presence of heathen phallism in the Christian symbols. A strong spiritual element of this worship may be easily demonstrated in the dogma of the Immaculate Conception of the Virgin Mother of God. A physical element equally proved in the fetish worship of the holy limbs of Saints Cosmo and Damiano at Isernia, near Naples. A successful traffic in which ex voto wax was carried on by the clergy annually until barely half a century ago. We're going to stop and talk real quick about that too, because I recently had both the pleasure and the pain of attending a Catholic Mass. Now, I've talked about this in another video, and we're going to talk about it as often as it comes up, but I'm not a Catholic, right? My mother's side of the family, however, all are. My grandfather recently passed, and because of that, I got to witness a Catholic Mass. It wasn't until then that I even understood exactly what a Mass was, right? It is a Mass intention. That is what it is called, which means it is a directing of the intentions of all of these people. That is what that means. A Mass intention is directing the intentions of all the Mass. But as a part of this, I got to go in a Catholic church, and I got to see firsthand the iconography. Now, this particular church, I don't know how it differs from others, but there was a round rotunda, and off to one side was congregation, and off to the other side was congregation, and in front of the altar was congregation, and behind the altar was the exclusive domain of the priests. This round rotunda had an alcove above it and kind of a dome, right, with a ledge around the dome. And on that ledge were several statues, the Virgin Mary being one, representations of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John being another one. There were stained glass windows with the same types of representations, and all of that to me is idolatry. Every single one of those features is an idolatry. The setting of the prayer in the name of the Virgin Mary also idolatry to me. Doesn't have to be to you, and I'm not here to attack your particular religion, even though this is going to come off as an attack by some people. All of those things are unnecessary, completely and totally unnecessary. You do not have to pray to Mary to intercede with Jesus for you. You can pray directly to God. I bring this up only to point out the fact that this is true, right? That there is still phallicism in Christian symbols, the cross being one of those. You can have your esoteric interpretation of the cross. I'm not going to fight you on it, but I also do not believe in that, right? There are several different heathen doctrines where talk about the soul of the universe being crucified across the solar system. I don't believe in that, right? I believe in a created universe. I believe that everything in it serves a purpose, that the electromagnetic perturbations of this planet spinning do affect you, but they don't rule your life like the horoscope would have you believe. They do, however, have influences upon your energy, and that can be read by people who are sensitive to those things. Some tarot readers do that. Some astrologers do that. But if it is, I'm going to look at this book and tell you what this book says, and that is how you're going to read the energy, you're doing it incorrectly, right? If you're taking the particular dogmas of astrology or tarot, and that is how you do it, you're doing it wrong. If you take the energy that is being placed in and you are intuitively reading these things from what is shown to you in real time, that is a whole different thing. The church does that in very real ways, right? All of these ceremonies, they served a purpose. All of these statuaries, they served a purpose, and that was the incorporation of paganism into the church. That is why they have the statues. Those things are not intrinsically bad, but the worship of any statue is going to be bad. It is not going to work out the way that you want. And I understand that the Catholics don't worship the statues, but yes, they do, right? If you are placing an offering in front of the statue, that is worship. If you are bowing down to it and praying to it, that is worship, even if your intention is otherwise. If you are bowing down and praying to something, that is what you are worshiping. If your entire focus is upon something, that is what you are worshiping. It can be a television show. If all that you can make your conversation about is Yellowstone or Landman or whatever it happens to be these days, you are worshiping that. You are setting that up as an idol for yourself, and don't set up idols for yourself. Talk to God directly, but there is no physical representation of God, and anybody that can put a name on it is already doing it wrong, right? I use Yahweh. That is what I grew up with, the name of God being Yahweh, but even that I hold loosely, right? That is our interpretation of the name of God. It is not the undeniable name of God. Massive difference there. My intentionality is to serve the creator of the world, however the form may be. I don't necessarily hold it to be male, even though I use the terminology of him all the time. That is something that I grew up with. That is something that people are comfortable with. But I don't put a sex on God. I don't believe that there is a sky daddy up there waiting to judge you based upon your sins. I don't believe that. Do I believe that you sin? Yes. There are 7 virtues. There are 7 vices. They are a sliding scale, right? Lust and chastity are the same thing. They are 2 sides of the same coin. You are meant to be in the middle of that. You're not meant to be completely chaste, and you're not meant to be debauched. You're meant to find the one person that you are meant to spend your life with and create a life with them and love them fully and completely, with the exception of other people. That is how it's meant to be. You're not meant to be chaste and never procreate. That is not what was intended for you. You can choose that. You can find God inside of that, but that's not the intention. Greed and charity, again, sliding scale. You're not meant to give away everything, to go and to live completely poor. You're not meant for that. But you're not meant to accumulate everything. You're meant to find the balance. Have a house, have a home. Be productive in your works. Go forth, subdue the earth, be stewards thereof. That is the balance between greed and charity. All 7 of the virtues and all 7 of the vices are the exact same. You are meant to find the balance. It is extremely hard to find that balance if you, in particular, are listening to someone who is not in balance. These Catholic priests, they're not in balance. A vow of celibacy is not in balance. There was a time, a long time ago, and still today, in the Jewish faith, you were not even a man until after you were married. Yes, you achieved maturity at 13, but until you were married with children, you were not to be listened to. You didn't have the physical experience of life in order to be an authority on anything. Let that sink in before you go back to Jesus, right? Now, I firmly believe that the story we have in Jesus is not complete at all. I believe that there's a reason why we didn't see him from 13 until 32, right? There is a reason for that. That is because he was probably married. Nobody would listen to him if he had not been married. He probably lost his wife. Can I verify that with facts? No. It is a belief I have. Doesn't change anything doctrinally. I believe that for the reasons I just said, because it is the custom of the time. Nobody would listen to a 32-year-old bachelor, no matter what he was able to perform. Not in Jewish society. It was not going to happen. He would not be able to teach in a real way until then. But he was not able to access the higher dimensions, again, unless those requirements are met. If you are unaware, the study of Kabbalah, which has been extensive in this, is restricted to those over 30 years of age, right? I believe it's actually like 32 or 33, but maybe even 35. But you were not allowed to study the higher parts of Judaism, which is the Kabbalah, until you had met certain conditions. You had an age requirement. You had to be responsible in your society. It is a lot in common with the Masons of today. Those requirements had to be met, or nobody was going to listen to you. Jesus would not have been able to be a teacher if he had not at least, at some point, been married. Again, that is something that you don't have to believe in. You don't have to dogmatically assert. I don't dogmatically assert that. It is just a belief that I have. This worship of idols is a separation of you from God, right? This going to some intermediary in order to be forgiven, whether it be a priest, whether it be a deified man in the manner in which they have done with Jesus, that is unnecessary. You can go straight to God, and you should. If you can wrap your mind around that fact, your life will be better off. All right, back to the text. Now, where were we? A strong spiritual element of this worship may be easily demonstrated in the dogma of the Immaculate Conception of the Virgin Mother of God, and a physical element equally proved in the fetish worship of the holy limbs of St. Cosmos and St. Damiano at Isernia, near Naples, a successful traffic in which ex voto in wax was carried on by the clergy annually until barely half a century ago. We find it rather unwise on the part of the Catholic writers to pour out their vials of wrath in such sentences as these. In a multitude of pagodas, the phallic stone, ever and always assuming, like the Grecian batilos, the brutally indecent form of the lingam, the Mahadeva. Before casting slurs on a symbol whose profound metaphysical meaning is too much for the modern champions of that religion of sensualism par excellence, Roman Catholicism, to grasp, they are duty-bound to destroy their oldest churches and change the form of the cupolas of their own temples. The Mahodi of Elephanta, the round tower of Bangopur, the minarets of Islam, either rounded or pointed, are the originals of the campanile column of San Marco at Venice, of the Rochester Cathedral, and of the modern Duomo of Milan. All of these steeples, turrets, domes, and Christian temples are the reproductions of the primitive idea of the lithos, the upright phallus. The Western Tower of St. Paul's Cathedral, London, says the author of the Rosicrucians, is one of the double lithoi, placed always in front of every temple, Christian as well as heathen. Moreover, in all Christian churches, particularly in Protestant churches,
Where they figure most conspicuously, the 2 tables of stone in the Mosaic dispensation are placed over the altar side by side as a united stone, the tops of which are rounded. The right stone is masculine, the left feminine. Therefore, neither Catholics nor Protestants have a right to talk of the indecent forms of heathen monuments, so long as they ornament their own churches with the symbols of the lingam and yoni, and even write the laws of their God upon them. Agreed. Another detail, not redounding, very particularly to the honor of the Christian clergy, might be recalled in the word Inquisition. The torrents of blood shed by this Christian institution and the number of its human sacrifices are unparalleled in the annals of paganism. Another, still more prominent feature in which the clergy surpass their masters, the heathen, is sorcery. Now, again, let's pause and talk. There is a common misconception that Christianity just spread because it was good, right? I do not deny that good things have come from Christianity at all. It was a way, much in the way that Judaism was and much in the way that Islam is, a way to lift up and separate from the surrounding peoples. But it came at the point of a sword, right? All the way from Constantine up until 100 years ago, 150 years ago, right? Just before this in particular was written. If you deviated, you would die. If you did not accept, you would die. And so, therefore, Christianity was spread mostly not by word of mouth, but point of sword. The Inquisition being a very, very real part of that, but even like the conquest of Northern Europe, the getting rid of the Gauls and the Celtics and the various peoples who believed different things, you either went along with the Romans who came in and conquered you, or you died. And most people went along with it. And the church, in an attempt to make that a little bit more palatable, assimilated these rituals that we were talking about before, Christmas and Easter and those things like that. But it was indeed at the point of a sword that it was spread. When they came to this continent over here in North America and in South America, it was the same thing. If you did not believe, you died, right? That is what the Trail of Tears was based upon. That was the fall of the Aztec nations. That was the manifest destiny. It was the spread of this belief at the point of a sword or a bullet. That is how it worked, and you don't have to believe that. That can step on your toe. I step on a lot of toes, but it is true. The Inquisition in particular is a particularly fine point, right? If you believed that you could do the things that I am talking about me doing, you were burnt at the stake or tied to a chair and tossed in a river with stones in your lap to see if you would float. Those things really happened. They tied people in bags and burned them over the fire. They stuffed them into giant animals made out of brass and boiled them alive, roasted them. That is real. They stretched them out on racks until they confessed their sins. And that was for going directly to God with your requests and believing that it was possible that a miracle could happen, that you could influence that miracle, that you can make it happen. Well, that is sorcery and witchcraft, and you deserve to die. I don't believe that at all. Can there be negative intentions? Absolutely. They will repercuss upon you if they exist. That is a unmutable fact. That is the 8 laws of creation. That is how it works. But you can do all of these things that I am doing, and I go directly to God with it. I don't claim to follow Satan. I don't call upon the names of demons or angels or aliens. I don't do those things. I talk directly to God. And it is through that that I have been able to do things that would have gotten me tied to a stake and burnt. I personally would have been dismembered. I personally would have been stretched on the rack. I personally would have been anathema to the Christian church. They would have killed me. That is how it has happened. Despite the fact that through the entirety of the Bible, sorcery existed. What do you think Moses was doing? What do you think Miriam was doing? What do you think Aaron was doing? What do you think Joshua was doing? What do you think Solomon was doing? It was witchcraft. It was sorcery. But it was okay. It was okay because they won. The victor writes the histories. That is what happened. Go back and read through the Kings. And if you don't want to read through it, I did it for you. Go see what Solomon was really about. See if you want to follow that example for purity and goodness. See if that's what you want. Look at David. Jesus, David was... Good God. David was a thug. He was a vagabond. He was a turncoat. He was horrible and was unrepentant all the way up until his death. He was at best an energetic vampire. At worst, he was an entity. That is real. Read it. Kings, Chronicles. Go back and read it for yourself. See what the actual testimony of what David's life looked like. From the beginning to the end. Why was he called in to calm Saul when no one else could? This little boy was able to do it? I wonder why. I wonder why Saul got so jealous when his son formed a relationship, which was a little bit odd, to say the least, with David. Why did he get so jealous that he threw a rage and a fit? Was it jealousy? Was that one of the keys? Go back and read it and decide for yourself. I firmly believe that it might have been. I firmly believe that there was probably an inappropriate relationship going on there, despite the laws. David was not one for following the laws. Neither was Saul, and absolutely neither was Solomon. Go back and read it for yourself. Don't take my word on it. See what it says. They all practiced witchcraft. Miriam was the one that was bringing water. That's why they had such a problem after she died, after a dispute with Moses. She just happened to die. There's a lot in that book that gets skimmed over, that gets glossed over, and that gets apologized for that does not necessarily need to be. You should definitely read it for yourself and take off those glasses of predetermination. It will bring a brand new light to the way that you read it. I promise you that. Back to the text. Sorcery. Certainly, in no pagan temple was black magic, in its real and true sense, more practiced than in the Vatican. I'm going to let that sit for just a second. While strongly supporting exorcism as an important source of revenue, they neglected magic as little as the ancient heathen. It is easy to prove that the sortilegium, or sorcery, was widely practiced among the clergy and monks so late as the last century, and is practiced occasionally, even now. That is true. Anathemizing every manifestation of occult nature outside the precincts of the church, the clergy, notwithstanding proofs to the contrary, call it the works of Satan, the snares of fallen angels, who rush in and out from the bottomless pit, mentioned by John in his Kabbalistic revelation, from whence arises the smoke as the smoke of a great furnace. Intoxicated by its fumes, around this pit are daily gathering millions of spiritualists to worship at the abyss of Baal. More than ever arrogant, stubborn, and despotic, now that she has been nearly upset by modern research, not daring to interfere with the powerful champions of science, the Latin Church revenges herself upon the unpopular phenomena. A despot without a victim is a word void of sense, a power which neglects to assert itself through outward, well-calculated effects, risks being doubted in the end. The Church has no intention to fall into the oblivion of the ancient myths or to suffer her authority to be too closely questioned. Hence, she pursues, as well as the times permit, her traditional policy. Lamenting the enforced extinction of her ally, the Holy Inquisition, she makes a virtue of necessity. The only victims now within reach are the Spiritists of France. Recent events have shown that the meek spouse of Christ never disdains to retaliate upon helpless victims. Having successfully performed her part of Deus a Machina from behind the French bench, which has not scrupled to disgrace itself for her, the Church of Rome sets to work and shows in the year 1876 what she can do. From the whirling tables and drawing pencils of profane spiritualism, the Christian world is warned to turn the divine miracles of Lords. Meanwhile, the ecclesiastical authorities utilize their time in arranging for more easy triumphs, calculated to scare the superstitious out of their senses. So, acting under orders, the clergy hurl dramatic, if not very impressive, anathemas from every Catholic diocese, threaten right and left, excommunicate and curse, perceiving, finally, that her thunderbolts, directed even against the crowned heads, fall about as harmlessly as the Jupiterian lightnings of Offenbach's Caucasus. Rome turns about in powerless fury against the victimized protégés of the Emperor of Russia, the unfortunate Bulgarians and Servians. Undisturbed by evidence and sarcasm, unbaffled by proof, the Lamb of the Vatican impartially divides his wrath between the liberals of Italy, the impious whose breath has the stench of the sepulchre, the schismatic Russian Sarmantes, and the heretics and spiritualists, who worship at the bottomless pit where the great dragon lies in wait. Mr. Gladstone went to the trouble of making a catalogue of what he terms the flowers of speech disseminated through the papal discourses. Let us call a few of the chosen terms used by his vicegerent of him who said that. Whosoever shall say, "Thou fool," shall be in danger of hell fire. They are selected from authentic discourses. Those who oppose the Pope are wolves, Pharisees, thieves, liars, hypocrites, dropsical children of Satan, sons of perdition, of sin and corruption, satellites of Satan in human flesh, monsters of hell, demons incarnate, stinking corpses, men issued from the pits of hell, traitors and Judases, led by the spirit of hell, children of the deepest pits of hell, etc., etc. It is important to note right here that if you go back to the Old Testament, you will not find hell. The whole piously collected and published by Don Pasquale de Francis, whom Gladstone has with perfect propriety termed an accomplished professor of flunkyism in things spiritual. Since His Holiness the Pope has such a rich vocabulary of invectives at his command, why wonder that the Bishop of Toulouse did not scruple to utter the most undignified falsehoods about Protestants and spiritualists of America, people doubly odious to a Catholic, in his address to the diocese. Nothing, he remarks, is more common in an era of unbelief than to see a false revelation substitute itself for the true one, and minds neglect the teachings of the Holy Church to devote themselves to the study of divination and the occult sciences. There is nothing quite like narcissism to keep you firmly attached to an idea. If someone is telling you that you will be condemned for hell for thinking and discussing and asking questions, they are trying to manipulate you. You can find that all the way through the Bible. With a fine episcopal contempt for statistics and strangely confounding in his memory the audiences of the revivalists, Moody and Sankey, and the patrons of some of darkened seance rooms, he utters the unwarranted and fallacious assertion that it has been proven that spiritualism in the United States has caused 1/6 of all the cases of suicide and insanity. That is crazy, right? To say that it has been proven that spiritualism has caused 1/6 of all the cases of suicide and insanity is in itself insanity. He says that it is not possible that the spirits teach either an exact science because they are lying demons, or a useful science because the character of the word of Satan, like Satan himself, is sterile. He warns his dear collaborators that the writings in favor of spiritualism are under the ban, and he advises them to let it be known that to frequent spiritual circles with the intention of accepting the doctrine is to apostatize from the Holy Church and assume the risk of excommunication. Finally, says he, publish the fact that the teaching of spirit and no spirit should prevail against that of the pulpit of Peter, which is the teaching of the Spirit of God himself. Here is something that a lot of people are unaware of. Right? Peter is supposed to be the rock upon which the church is built. Is that correct? That's the common assumption, right? That's what is said in the book. Peter was in direct opposition to Paul. Right? Saul, who became Paul, was in direct opposition to every single one of the 11 surviving disciples of God, or of Jesus, not God. The 11 surviving apostles, the people who actually stood at the feet of Jesus and learned directly from the mouth of Jesus, directly contradicts the writings of Paul. But Paul makes up the greater portion of the letters that we have. The doctrine which was set down is based upon Paul and not Peter, upon Paul and not John, upon Paul and not James, upon Paul and not Matthew or Mark or even Luke. Paul, who had no direct relation to Jesus. Now, he asserts that he met Jesus on the road and that Jesus blinded him and that he walked to this other city and that the blindness was taken away. And even assuming that that is correct, that is no more authority than what I purport, right? I have had a direct revelation from God. The things that I talk about came directly from God. And so me and Paul have exactly the same authority. But Paul stood in direct opposition to the teachings of the people who studied at the feet of Jesus. That is indisputable. It is not directly stated, but it is most definitely asserted and implied within the Gospels, the book of Acts, and the letters going forward, when it talks about certain disciples teaching the wrong things. That was Paul talking about Peter. That is a severe contradiction for you if you believe in Christianity. That is something that you have to come to terms with. Paul was in direct opposition to the teachings of Peter. And so if the church is built upon the rock that is Peter, there's a lot of investigation that needs to be done. Why do we not have a gospel of Peter? Why do we not have a gospel of Peter? The gospels were written with intention. They were creating a religion every bit as much as Moses was and every bit as much as Muhammad did. It was an intentional creation of a religion. They were changing this people into a new people, separate from the people around. And that's not entirely a bad thing. It was effective. It did something. But that doesn't mean that it was true. It does not mean that it was correct. And that is something that you have to dig into for yourself. I can tell you, I have, why I believe those things, how I came to believe them. But I cannot force that upon you. I'm not even here to try. I'm here to tell you about things, not to convince you of them. Peter and Paul were in complete opposition to each other, and that is an uncontrovertible problem. Aware of the many false teachings attributed by the Roman Church to the Creator, we prefer disbelieving the latter assertion. The famous Catholic theologian, Tillemont, assures us in his work that all the illustrious pagans are condemned to the eternal torments of hell because they lived before the time of Jesus and therefore could not be benefited by the redemption. We're going to pause on that one too. Here's something for you. This is probably going to set off you. Like, if you believe, you're probably not going to like this. What you're telling me with this assertion right here is that the all-powerful, omniscient God of all creation was restricted from forgiving you from sin unless you accepted this death of the person who has not even existed yet, who you've never even heard of. You're condemned to an eternal hell, which did not exist in the Bible or in the Old Testament at all. Right? There was Sheol, which is where all dead people went. And there was life, and those were the only two options. There was no hell, there was no burning pit of eternal torment. That was not a thing in Judaism. But God is restricted. You're telling me that God is the typify, the example of the beneficent Father. If we look at the example of the prodigal son, which is the example that I use most often for this, there was a father who had two sons, and the one son wanted his inheritance early, and he got it. And he went and he wasted it. He squandered it. He used it in all kinds of devious, terrible things. And he had to live with the pigs, which is a whole thing, right? But he had to live with the pigs. And he's like, even the servants of my father are treated better than this. And so he went home. And his father, this mortal human, looked up while he was working with the other son, and he saw coming over the hill his son. And his first response, the very first thing he did, was to tell his other son, go and kill the fatted calf. And he took off running to go meet his son on the hill. He didn't wait for his son to come to him and kill a cow. He said, I'm going to kill the cow in celebration of you coming home to me. That is how God looks at it. He sees his son coming over the hill, and he's like, yes, let us celebrate. He doesn't say, until you make this sacrifice, you are not welcome. He doesn't say that. God is the epitome of the good father, and he can't be less than any other father. And I'm going to tell you now, I'm a good father. I have set out intentionally throughout the entirety of my children's lives to be part of it, to teach them and instruct them and to do things for them, and it has worked. And I don't say that to be prideful. I am saying that because I have a wonderful relationship with my children. They are both great kids. And even so, I have failed. Even so, I have lost my temper. Even so, I have done things that are outside of. I am not the example of a perfect father, but I am an example of a good one. And even me, I'm not going to make my kid have a sacrifice in order to come home. It's not going to happen. My child is welcome in my home regardless. You came home, I am happy. That is God. That is how he looks at you. He doesn't need you to kill a cow in order to be redeemed from your sins. He doesn't have to wash you in blood in order for you to come home to him. He wants you home regardless. He'll fix you when you get home. That's how that works. He wants you to change your heart to him so that he can change you into what needs to be. That's how that works. And so to say that somebody who has never had the conception of Jesus, they have never heard of Jesus, is condemned to burn for eternity is mean-spirited and evil in the best degree, right? To the utmost. If you believe that somebody is going to burn in hell for something that they did not even know about, you are evil. Back to the text. He also assures us that the Virgin Mary personally testified to this truth over her own signature in a letter to a saint. Show me that one. Therefore, this is also a revelation, the Spirit of God himself teaching such charitable doctrines. We have also read with great advantage the topographical descriptions of hell and purgatory in the celebrated treatise under that name by a Jesuit, the Cardinal Bellarmine. A critic found that the author, who gives the description from a divine vision with which he was favored, appears to possess all the knowledge of a land measurer about the secret tracks and formidable divisions of the bottomless pit. Justin Martyr, having actually committed to paper the heretical thought that, after all, Socrates might not be altogether fixed in hell, his Benedictine editor criticizes this too benevolent father very severely. Whoever doubts the Christian charity of the Church of Rome in this direction is invited to peruse the censure of the Sorbonne on Marmontel's Belisarius. The Odium Theologicum blazes in it on the dark sky of orthodox theology like an aurora borealis, the precursor to God's wrath, according to the teaching of certain medieval divines. We have attempted in the first part of this work to show, by historical examples, how completely men of science have deserved the stinging sarcasm of the late Professor de Morgan, who remarked of them that they wear the priest's cast-off garb, dyed to escape detection. The Christian clergy are, in like manner, attired in the cast-off garb of the heathen priesthood, acting diametrically in opposition to their God's moral precepts, but nevertheless sitting in judgment over the whole world. When dying on the cross, the martyred man of sorrows forgave his enemies. His last words were a prayer in their behalf. He taught his disciples to curse not, but to bless even their foes. But the heirs of St. Peter, the self-constituted representatives on earth of that same meek Jesus, unhesitatingly curse whoever resists their despotic will. Besides, was not the Son long since crowded by them into the background? They make their obeisance only to the Dowager Mother, for according to their teachings, again through the direct Spirit of God, she alone acts as a mediatrix. The Ecumenical Council of 1870 embodied the teaching into a dogma, to disbelieve which is to be doomed forever to the bottomless pit. The work of Don Pasquale de Franciscis is positive on that point, for he tells us that as the Queen of Heaven owes to the present Pope the finest gem in her coronet, since he has conferred on her the unexpected honor of becoming suddenly immaculate, there is nothing she cannot obtain from her Son for her Church. Some years ago, certain travelers saw in Bari, Italy, a statue of the Madonna, arrayed in a flounced peak skirt over a swelling crinoline. Pious pilgrims, who may be anxious to examine the regulation wardrobe of their God's Mother, may do so by going to southern Italy, Spain, and Catholic North and South America. The Madonna of Bari must still be there, between two vineyards and a locanda, gin shop. When last seen, a half-successful attempt had been made to clothe the infant Jesus. They had covered his legs with a pair of dirty, scalloped-edged pantaloons. An English traveler, having presented the mediatrix with a green silk parasol, the grateful population of the contadini, accompanied by the village priest, went in procession to the spot. They managed to stick the sunshade, opened, between the infant's back and the arm of the Virgin which embraced him. The scene and ceremony were both solemn and highly refreshing to our religious feelings. For there stood the image of the goddess, in its niche, surrounded with a row of ever-burning lamps, the flames of which, flickering in the breeze, infect God's pure air with an offensive smell of olive oil. The mother and son truly represent the two most conspicuous idols of monotheistic Christianity. That is true. For a companion to the idol of the poor contadini of Bari, go to the rich city of Rio de Janeiro, in the church of Duomo del Candelaria. In a long hall running along one side of the church, there might be seen, a few years ago, another Madonna. Along the walls of the hall there is a line of saints, each standing in a contribution box, which thus forms a fit pedestal. In the center of this line, under a gorgeously rich canopy of blue silk, is exhibited the Virgin Mary, leaning on the arm of Christ. Our Lady is arrayed in a very delicate blue satin dress with short sleeves, showing, to great advantage, a snow-white, exquisitely molded neck, shoulders, and arms. The skirt, equally of blue satin, with an overskirt of rich lace and gauze puffs, is as short as that of a ballet dancer. Hardly reaching the knee, it exhibits a pair of finely shaped legs, covered with flesh-colored silk tights, a blue satin French boots with very high red heels. The blonde hair of this Mother of God, is arranged in the latest fashion, with a voluminous chignon and curls. As she leans on her son's arm, her face is lovingly turned towards her only begotten, whose dress and attitude are equally worthy of admiration. Christ wears an evening dress coat with swallowtail, black trousers and low-cut white vest, varnished boots and white kid gloves, over one of which sparkles a rich diamond ring worth many thousands, we must suppose, a precious Brazilian jewel. Above this body of the modern Portuguese dandy is a head with the hair parted in the middle, a sad and solemn face, and eyes whose patient look seems to reflect all the bitterness of this last insult flung at the majesty of the crucified. The Egyptian Isis was also represented as a Virgin Mother by her devotees, and as holding her infant son, Horus, in her arms. In some statues and basso-relievos, when she appears alone, she is either completely nude or veiled from head to foot, but in the mysteries, in common with nearly every other goddess, she is entirely veiled from head to foot, as a symbol of a mother's chastity. It would not do us any harm were we to borrow from the ancients some of the poetic sentiment in their religions, and the innate veneration they entertained for their symbols. It is but fair to say at once that the last of the true Christians died with the last of the direct apostles. Max Muller forcibly asks, how can a missionary in such circumstances meet the surprise and questions of his pupils unless he may point to that seed, and to tell them what Christianity was meant to be? Unless he may show that, like all other religions, Christianity too had its history, that the Christianity of the 19th century is not the Christianity of the Middle Ages, and that the Christianity of the Middle Ages was not that of the early councils, that the Christianity of the early councils was not that of the apostles, and that what has been said by Christ, that alone was well said. Thus, we may infer that the only characteristic difference between modern Christianity and the old heathen faiths is the belief of the former in a personal devil and in hell. The Aryan nations had no devil, says Max Muller. Pluto, though of a somber character, was a very respectable personage, and Loki, the Scandinavian, though a mischievous person, was not a fiend. The German goddess, Hel, too, like Proserpine, had once seen better days. Thus, when the Germans were indoctrinated with the idea of a real devil, the Semitic Seth, Satan, or Diabolus, they treated him in the most good-humored way. The same may be said of Hell. Hades was quite a different place from our region of eternal damnation, and might be termed rather an intermediate state of purification. We have already touched upon that as already in this particular video, so we're not going to do it again, but yeah, hell did not exist. Neither does the Scandinavian Hel, or Hela, imply either a state or a place of punishment. For when Frigga, the grief-stricken mother of Baldur, the white god, who died and found himself in the dark abodes of the shadows, Hades, sent Hermod, a son of Thor, in quest of her beloved child. The messenger found him in the inexecrable region, alas, but still comfortably seated on a rock and reading a book. The Norse kingdom of the dead is moreover situated in the higher latitudes of the polar regions. It is a cold and cheerless abode, and neither the gelid halls of Hela nor the occupation of Baldur present the least similitude to the blazing hell of eternal fire and miserable damned sinners with which the Church so generously peoples it. No more is it the Egyptian Amynths, a region of judgment and purification, nor the Andhara, the abyss of darkness for the Hindus. For even the fallen angels, hurled into it by Siva, are allowed by Parabrahma to consider it as an intermediate state, in which opportunity is afforded them to prepare for higher degrees of purification and redemption from their wretched condition. The Gehenna of the New Testament was a locality outside the walls of Jerusalem, and in mentioning it, Jesus used but an ordinary metaphor. Whence then came the dreary dogma of hell, that Archimedean lever of Christian theology, with which they have succeeded to hold in subjection the numberless millions of Christians for 19 centuries? Assuredly not from the Jewish scriptures, and we appeal for corroboration to any well-informed Hebrew scholar. And again, yes, there was no concept of hell in the Old Testament whatsoever. That is quite apparent if you read through it, and again, I have done so for you if you don't want to do it yourself. Don't take my word for it. Absolutely fall back and read it for yourself and see if I'm telling the truth. The only designation of something approaching hell in the Bible is Gehenna, or Hinnom, a valley near Jerusalem, where was situated Tophet, a place where fire was perpetually kept for sanitary purposes. The prophet Jeremiah informs us that the Israelites used to sacrifice their children to Molech Hercules on that spot, and later we find Christians quietly replacing this divinity by their God of mercy, whose wrath will not be appeased unless the church sacrifices to him her unbaptized children and sinning sons on the altar of eternal damnation. Whence then did the divine learn so well the conditions of hell as to actually divide its torments into two kinds, the poena damni and the poenae sensus, the former being the privation of the beatific vision, the latter the eternal pains in a lake of fire and brimstone? If they answer us that it is in the Apocalypse 20:10, we are prepared to demonstrate whence the theologian John himself derived the idea. And the devil that deceived them was cast into a lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented forever and ever, he says, laying aside the esoteric interpretation that the devil, or tempting demon, meant our own earthly body, which after death will surely dissolve in the fiery or ethereal elements. The word eternal, by which our theologians interpret the words forever and ever, does not exist in the Hebrew language, either as a word or meaning. There is no Hebrew word which properly expresses eternity. Olam, according to Leclerc, only imports a time whose beginning or end is not known, while showing that this word does not mean infinite duration, and that in the Old Testament the word forever only signifies a long time. Archbishop Tilliston has completely perverted its sense with respect to the idea of hell torments. According to his doctrine, when Sodom and Gomorrah are said to be suffering eternal fire, we must understand it only in the sense of the fire not being extinguished until both cities were entirely consumed. But, as to hellfire, the words must be understood in the strictest sense of infinite duration. Such is the decree of the learned divine, for the duration of the punishment of the wicked must be proportionate to the eternal happiness of the righteous. So he says, "These," speaking of the wicked, "shall go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into life eternal." The Reverend T. Herndon, commenting on the speculations of his predecessors, fills a whole volume with unanswerable arguments, tending to show that the locality of hell is in the sun. We suspect that the reverend speculator had read the Apocalypse in bed and had the nightmare in consequence. There are 2 verses in the Revelation of John, reading thus: "And the 4th angel poured out his vial upon the sun, and power was given him to scorch men with fire. And men were scorched with great heat, and blasphemed the name of God." There is an alternative reading for this, or not reading, but interpretation. If you are unaware, I have done a little bit of work on this too. There is a 12,000 year disaster cycle. It is dependent upon the sun and the way that the earth is going to be situated, I am not going to get into the details here, but I have in other places, and most notably the 12,000 year disaster cycle. I don't know that I'm going to have enough room to put the links for all of these things, but you can look them up individually. They are contained within the playlists that will most definitely be up here. And so there is an alternative explanation on what could possibly be happening here. It is trackable, traceable, scientific. It is entirely possible that it is wrong, however, and so take it with a grain of salt. It is what I believe is going to happen. I do believe that there is a cyclical disaster cycle. I do believe that it is a 12,000 year cycle with a 6,000 year intermediate opposite point, which means that once upon a time, 12,000 years ago, roughly, there was a fire event which correlates with the casting out of Eden and the great fiery sword that no longer allowed them to dwell where they were. I believe that 6,000 years following that, there was a wet event, which was the flood of Noah, or wherever they stole that from. I do believe that this is a repeating pattern and that we are now back into the hot event or the fiery event, and that will happen at some point in the near future. One of the signs by which we will be able to see that will be a darkening of the sun. That, I believe, is what is being referred to here. That when the angel pours his vial upon the sun, it is going to have magnetic perturbations and it will interfere with our magnetic shield around our sun, which means that the shielding that we have from the cosmic radiation of the sun will be lessened. And as a consequence of that, people will be scorched, right? You get a sunburn if you stay out in the sun too long, and that is with the protection of the atmosphere. When the event happens and we don't have that protection for a short period of time, it's not a permanent thing, that we will be getting sunburns almost instantaneously, probably to a great degree. You are told to closet yourself away until the sun returns to its normal function. Again, we talk about that in more detail in the other place. And so, I don't know where they're going with this, but that particular verse, that's what I believe that means. We have talked about that in extensive detail as well in the Unconventional Bible Study. There are many places in there that lend credence to the theory that I just proposed. This is simply Pythagorean and Kabbalistic allegory. The idea is neither new with the above-mentioned author nor with John. Pythagoras placed the sphere of purification in the sun, which sun, with its sphere, he moreover locates in the middle of the universe. The allegory having a double meaning. 1. Symbolically, the central spiritual sun, the supreme deity. Arrived at this region, every soul becomes purified of its sins and unites itself forever with its spirit, having previously suffered throughout all the lower spheres. By placing the sphere of visible fire in the middle of the universe, he simply taught the heliocentric system, which appertained to the mysteries, and was imparted only in the higher degree of initiation. John gives to his word a purely Kabbalistic significance, which no fathers, except those who had belonged to the Neoplatonic school, were able to comprehend. Origen understood it well, having been a pupil of Ammonius Saccas. Therefore, we see him bravely denying the perpetuity of hell torments. He maintains that not only men, but even devils, by which term he meant disembodied human sinners, after a certain duration of punishment shall be pardoned and finally restored to heaven. In consequence of this and other such heresies, Origen was, as a matter of course, exiled. Many have been the learned and truly inspired speculations as to the locality of hell. The most popular were those which placed it in the center of the earth. At a certain time, however, skeptical doubts which disturbed the placidity of faith in this highly refreshing doctrine arose in consequence of the meddling scientists of those days. As to Mr. Swindon in our own century observes, the theory was inadmissible because of two objections. First, that a fund of fuel or sulfur sufficient to maintain so furious and constant a fire could not be there supposed, and second, that it must want the nitrous particles in the air to sustain and keep it alive. And how, says he, can a fire be eternal when by degrees the whole substance of the earth must be consumed thereby? The skeptical gentleman had evidently forgotten that centuries ago St. Augustine solved the difficulty. Have we not the word of this learned divine that hell, nevertheless, is in the center of the earth, for God supplies the central fire with air by a miracle? The argument is unanswerable, so we will not seek to upset it. Okay, I'm going to answer it. Did I not have that transition? I must not have. I'm sorry. Y'all can go back and pull up the reading yourself. I try to keep it where y'all can read along with me, but it's not really necessary. I believe that the universe is electromagnetic, that all of creation is indeed the Holy Spirit, and that the Holy Spirit is electromagnetic in nature, that the interaction between everything is due to chemical bonds, due to electromagnetics. I believe that the sun is an emanation point for electromagnetics, that it receives the electricity from somewhere else, and it conveys that to us in the manner in which solar radiation is. I believe that a part of that is fueling the core of the earth. Not necessarily hell, although I could be completely wrong. I do not believe I am, but it is possible. I believe that when we have sunspots and things of that nature, we have the explosions that happen on the sun. I can't remember the exact terminology for it at the moment, and it'll probably come to me later, but there are eruptions, right? Solar filaments that explode and discharge, sometimes in our direction, most often not. I believe that those power the planet. They are what keeps the core molten. It is not necessarily the compaction, which is the prevailing theory, right? The gravity of mass is holding in friction and causing the volcanic activities and things of that nature. It is trackable and traceable that when we have these problems on the sunspots and the various things that are there, that they affect our weather patterns and volcanic emanations and earthquakes. There are several people doing a lot of good work with that. You can find the resources on my channel. They are linked in my favorite channels on the bottom of the page. I believe that this energy is transferred to us, right? It comes from somewhere else to the sun, and it is then by the sun discharged to us, and that is what keeps the core molten. There are reasons to believe that. There are reasons to not believe that. It happens to be my opinion. That doesn't mean that it is fact. If I know something, I tell you I know it. If I guess it, I tell you I guess it. I am guessing this. It seems to fit. The math works a lot better than the other models. And so that is how I lean. Whenever I have something that appears to be true, I investigate it. And if it withstands some investigation, then it is probably true. That is not a doctrinal issue. It doesn't really matter in the grand scope of spirituality, but that is how I believe the mechanics work. All right, back to the text. The Christians were the first to make the existence of Satan a dogma of the church, and once that she had established it, she had to struggle for over 1,700 years for the repression of a mysterious force, which it was her policy to make appear of diabolical origin. Unfortunately, in manifesting itself, this force invariably tends to upset such a belief by the ridiculous discrepancy it presents between the alleged cause and the effects. If the clergy have not overestimated the real power of the archenemy of God, it must be confessed that he takes mighty precautions against being recognized as the Prince of Darkness who aims at our souls. If modern spirits are devils at all, as preached by the clergy, then they can only be those poor or stupid devils whom Max Muller describes as appearing so often in the German and Norwegian tales. Notwithstanding this, the clergy fear, above all, to be forced to relinquish this hold on humanity. They are not willing to let us judge of the tree by its fruits, for that might sometimes force them into a dangerous dilemmas. They refuse, likewise, to admit with unprejudiced people that the phenomena of spiritualism has unquestionably spiritualized and reclaimed from evil courses many an indomitable atheist and skeptic. But, as they confess themselves, what is the use of a pope as there is no devil? And so, Rome sends her ablest advocates and preachers to the rescue of those perishing in the bottomless pit. Rome employs her cleverest writers for this purpose, albeit they all indignantly deny the accusation, and in the preface to every book put forth by the prolific de Mousseau, the French Tertullian of our century, we find undeniable proofs of the fact. Among other certificates of ecclesiastical approval, every volume is ornamented with the text of a certain original letter addressed to the very pious author by the world-renowned Father Ventura de Rolicia of Rome. Few are those who have not heard this famous name. I have not heard that name. It is the name of one of the chief pillars of the Latin Church, the ex-general of the Order of the Theatins, consultor of the Sacred Congregation of Rites, examiner of bishops, and of the Roman clergy, etc., etc., etc. This strikingly characteristic document will remain to astonish future generations by its spirit of unsophisticated demonolatry and unblushing sincerity. We translate a fragment verbatim, and by thus helping its circulation, hope to merit the blessings of Mother Church. Monsieur, un excellent front. The greatest victory of Satan was gained on that day when he succeeded in making himself denied. To demonstrate the existence of Satan is to reestablish one of the fundamental dogmas of the Church, which serve as a basis for Christianity, and without which Satan would be but a name. Magic, mesmerism, magnetism, somnambulism, spiritualism, spiritism, hypnotism are only other names for Satanism. To bring out such a truth and show it in its proper light is to unmask the enemy. It is to unveil the immense danger of certain practices reputed innocent. It is to deserve well in the eyes of humanity and of religion. Father Ventura de Bralica. Amen. This is an unexpected honor indeed for our American controls in general, and the innocent Indian guides in particular, to be thus introduced in Rome as princes of the Empire of Eblis is more than they could ever hope for in other lands. Without the least suspecting that she was working for the future welfare of her enemies, the spiritualists and spiritists, the Church, some 20 years since, in tolerating de Mousseau and de Merville as the biographers of the devil, and giving her approbation thereto, tacitly confessed the literary co-partnership. Monsieur the Chevalier de Gounod de Mousseau and his friend and collaborator, the Marquis Eudes de Merville, to judge by their long titles, must be aristocrats, pur sang, and they are, moreover, writers of no small erudition and talent. Were they to show themselves a little more parsimonious of double points of exclamation following every vituperation and invective against Satan and his worshippers, their style would be faultless. As it is, the crusade against the enemy of mankind was fierce and lasted for over 20 years. What with the Catholics piling up their psychological phenomena to prove the existence of a personal devil, and the Count de Gasperin, an ancient minister of Louis Philippe, collecting volumes of other facts to prove the contrary, the Spiritists of France have contracted an everlasting debt of gratitude towards the disputants. The existence of an unseen spiritual universe peopled with invisible beings has now been demonstrated beyond question. Ransacking the oldest libraries, they have distilled from the historical records the quintessence of evidence. All epochs from the Homeric down to the present day have supplied their choicest materials to these indefatigable authors. In trying to prove the authenticity of the miracles wrought by Satan in the days preceding the Christian era, as well as throughout the Middle Ages, they have simply laid a firm foundation for a study of the phenomena in our modern times. Though an ardent, uncompromising enthusiast, de Mousseau unwittingly transforms himself into the tempting demon, or, as he is fond of calling the devil, the serpent of Genesis, in his desire to demonstrate in every manifestation the presence of the evil one. He only succeeds in demonstrating that spiritualism and magic are no new things in the world, but very ancient twin brothers, whose origin must be sought for in the earliest infancy of ancient India, Chaldea, Babylonia, Egypt, Persia, and Greece. He proves the existence of spirits, whether these be angels or devils, with such a clearness of argument and logic, and such an amount of evidence, historical, irrefutable, and strictly authenticated, that little is left for spiritualist authors who may come after him. How unfortunate that the scientists, who believe neither in the devil nor spirit, are more than likely to ridicule Monsieur de Mousseau's books without reading them, for they really contain so many facts of profound scientific interest. But what can we expect in our own age of unbelief when we find Plato, over 22 centuries ago, complaining of the same? Me too, says he in his Euthyphrion. When I say anything in the public assembly concerning divine things, and predict to them what is going to happen, they ridicule as mad, and although nothing that I have predicted has proved untrue, yet they envy all such men as we are. However, we ought not to heed, but pursue our own way. The literary resources of the Vatican and other Catholic repositories of learning must have been freely placed at the disposal of these modern authors. When one has such treasures at hand, original manuscripts, papyri, and books pillaged from the richest heathen libraries, old treatises on magic and alchemy, and records of all the trials for witchcraft and sentences for the same to rack, stake, and torture, it is mighty easy to write volumes of accusations against the devil. We affirm on good grounds that there are hundreds of the most valuable works on occult sciences which are sentenced to eternal concealment from the public, but are attentively read and studied by this privileged who have access to the Vatican library. The laws of nature are the same for heathen sorcerer as for Catholic saint, and a miracle may be produced as well by one as by the other, without the slightest intervention of God or devil. Hardly had the manifestations begun to attract attention in Europe, then the clergy commenced their outcry that the traditional enemy had reappeared under another name, and divine miracles also began to be heard of in isolated instances. First, they were confined to humble individuals, some of whom claimed to have them produced through the intervention of the Virgin Mary, saints and angels. Others, according to the clergy, began to suffer from obsession and possession, for the devil must have his share of fame as well as the deity. Finding that, notwithstanding the warning, the independent or so-called spiritual phenomena went on increasing and multiplying, and that these manifestations threatened to upset the carefully constructed dogmas of the Church, the world was suddenly startled by extraordinary intelligence. In 1864, a whole community became possessed of the devil. Morzine and the awful stories of its demoniacs, Valois and the narratives of his well-authenticated exhibitions of sorcery, and those of the Presbytere de Seedville, curdled the blood in Catholic veins. Strange to say, the question has been asked over and over again why the divine miracles and most of the obsessions are so strictly confined to Roman Catholic dioceses and countries. Why is it that since the Reformation there has been scarcely one single divine miracle in a Protestant land? Of course, the answer we must expect from Catholics is that the latter are peopled by heretics and abandoned by God. Then why are there no more church miracles in Russia, a country whose religion differs from the Roman Catholic faith, but in external forms of rites, its fundamental dogmas being identically the same, except as to the emanation of the Holy Ghost? Russia has her accepted saints and thaumaturgical relics and miracle-working images. The Saint Mithrophany of Voronezh is an authenticated miracle worker, but his miracles are limited to healing. And though hundreds upon hundreds have been healed through faith, and though the old cathedral is full of magnetic effluvia, and whole generations will go on believing in his power, some persons will always be healed. Still, no such miracles are heard of in Russia as the Madonna walking, and the Madonna letter writing, and statue talking of Catholic countries. Why is this so? Simply because the emperors have strictly forbidden that sort of thing. The Tsar, Peter the Great, stopped every spurious divine miracle with one frown of his mighty brow. He declared that he would have no false miracles played by the holy icons, images of saints, and they disappeared forever. There are cases on record of isolated and independent phenomena exhibited by certain images in the last century. The latest was the bleeding of the cheek of an image of the Virgin, when a soldier of Napoleon cut her face in two. This miracle, alleged to have happened in 1812 in the days of the invasion by the Grand Army, was the final farewell. But since then, although 3 successive emperors have been pious men, their will has been respected, and the images and saints have remained quiet, and hardly been spoken of except as connected with religious worship. In Poland, a land of furious ultramontanism, there were, at different times, desperate attempts at miracle doing. They died at birth, however, for the Argus-eyed police were there. A Catholic miracle in Poland, made public by the priest, generally meaning political revolution, bloodshed, and war. Is it, then, not permissible to at least suspect that if in one country divine miracles may be arrested by civil and military law, and in another they never occur, we must search for the explanation of the two facts in some natural cause, instead of attributing them to either God or devil? In our opinion, if it is worth anything, the whole secret may be accounted for as follows. In Russia, the clergy knows better than to bewilder their parishes, whose piety is sincere and faith strong without miracles. They know that nothing is better calculated than the latter to sow seeds of distrust, doubt, and finally of skepticism, which leads directly to atheism. Moreover, the climate is less propitious, and the magnetism of the average population too positive, too healthy, to call forth independent phenomena, and fraud would not answer. On the other hand, neither in Protestant Germany, nor England, nor yet in America, since the days of the Reformation, has the clergy had access to any of the Vatican secret libraries. Hence, they are all but poor hands at the magic of Albertus Magnus. As for America being overflowed with sensitives and mediums, the reason for it is partially attributable to climatic influence, and especially to the physiological condition of the population. Since the days of the Salem witchcraft 200 years ago, when the comparatively few settlers had pure and unadulterated blood in their veins, nothing much had been heard of spirits or mediums until 1840. The phenomena then first appeared among the ascetic and exalted Shakers, whose religious aspirations, peculiar mode of life, moral purity, and physical chastity all led to the production of independent phenomena of psychological as well as physical nature. Hundreds of thousands and even millions of men from various climates and different constitutions and habits have, since 1692, invaded North America, and by intermarrying have substantially changed the physical type of the inhabitants. Of what country in the world do women's constitutions bear comparison with the delicate, nervous, and sensitive constitutions of the feminine population of the United States? Wow, that's changed. We were stuck in her arrival in the country with the semi-transparent delicacy of skin of the natives of both sexes. Compare a hard-working Irish factory girl or boy with one from a genuine American family. Look at their hands. One works as hard as the other. They are of equal age and both seemingly healthy. And still, while the hands of the one, after an hour's soaping, will show a skin a little softer than that of the alligator, those of the other, notwithstanding constant use, will allow you to observe the circulation of the blood under the thin and delicate epidermis. No wonder, then, that while the American is the conservatory of sensitives, the majority of its clergy, unable to produce divine or any other miracles, stoutly deny the possibility of any phenomena except those produced by tricks and juggling. And no wonder also that the Catholic priesthood, who are practically aware of the existence of magic and spiritual phenomena, and believe in them, while dreading their consequences, try to attribute the whole to the agency of the devil. Let us adduce one more argument, if only for the sake of circumstantial evidence. In what countries have divine miracles flourished most, been most frequent and most stupendous? Catholic Spain and Pontifical Italy, beyond question. And which more than these two has had access to ancient literature? Spain was famous for her libraries. The Moors were celebrated for their profound learning in alchemy and other sciences. The Vatican is the storehouse of an immense number of ancient manuscripts. During the long interval of nearly 1,500 years, they have been accumulating, from trial after trial, books and manuscripts confiscated from their sentenced victims to their own profit. The Catholics may plead that the books were generally committed to the flames, and that the treatises of famous sorcerers and enchanters perished with their accursed authors. But the Vatican, if it could speak, could tell a different story. It knows too well of the existence of certain closets and rooms, access to which is had by the very few. It knows that the entrances to these secret hiding places are so cleverly concealed from sight in the carved framework and under the profuse ornamentation of the library walls, that there have even been popes who lived and died within the precincts of the palace without ever suspecting their existence. But these popes were neither Sylvester II, Benedict IX, John the 20th, or the 6th and 7th Gregory, nor yet the famous Borgia of toxicological memory. Neither were those who remained ignorant of the hidden lore friends of the sons of Loyola. Where, in the records of European magic, can we find cleverer enchanters than in the mysterious solitudes of the cloister? Albert Magnus, the famous bishop and conjurer of Ratisbon, was never surpassed in his art. Roger Bacon was a monk, and Thomas Aquinas one of the most learned pupils of Albertus. Trithemius, abbot of the Spanheim Benedictines, was a teacher, friend, and confidant of Cornelius Agrippa, and while the confederations of the Theosophists were scattered broadcast about Germany, where they first originated, assisting one another and struggling for years for the acquirement of esoteric knowledge, any person who knew how to become the favored pupil of certain monks might very soon be proficient in all the important branches of occult learning. This is all in history and cannot be easily denied. Magic, in all its aspects, was widely and nearly openly practiced by the clergy till the Reformation, and even he who was once called the father of the Reformation, the famous John Reuchlin, author of the Mirific Word and friend of Pico de Mirandola, the teacher and instructor of Erasmus, Luther, and Melanchthon, was a Kabbalist and occultist. The ancient sortilegium, or divination by means of sortes or lots, an art and practice now decried by the clergy as an abomination, designated by Stat 10 Jack as felony and by Stat 12 Carolus II, accepted out of the general pardons on the grounds of being sorcery, was widely practiced by the clergy and monks. Nay, it was sanctioned by St. Augustine himself, who does not disapprove of this method of learning futurity, provided it be not used for worldly purposes. More than that, he confesses having practiced it himself. Aye, but the clergy called it sortes sanctorum, when it was they who practiced it, while the sortes prenestinae, succeeded by the sortes homericae and sortes virgilianae, were abominable heathenism, the worship of the devil, when used by anyone else. Gregory de Tours informs us that when the clergy resorted to the sortes, their custom was to lay the Bible on the altar and pray the Lord that he would discover his will, and disclose to them futurity in one of the verses of the book. Gilbert de Nozier writes that in his days, about the 12th century, the custom was, at the consecration of bishops, to consult the sortes sanctorum, and thereby learn the success and fate of the episcopate. On the other hand, we are told that the sortes sanctorum were condemned by the Council of Agda in 506. In this case, again, we are left to inquire in which instance has the infallibility of the Church failed. Was it when she prohibited that which was practiced by her greatest saint and patron, Augustine, or in the 12th century, when it was openly, and with the sanction of the same Church, practiced by the clergy for the benefit of the bishops' elections? Or must we still believe that in both of these contradictory cases the Vatican was inspired by the direct Spirit of God? If any doubt that Gregory of Tours approved of a practice that prevails to this day, more or less, even among strict Protestants, let them read this. Lindastus, Earl of Tours, who was for ruining me with Queen Fredegonde, coming to Tours, big with evil designs against me. I withdrew to my oratory under a deep concern, where I took the Psalms. My heart revived within me when I cast my eyes on this of the 77th Psalm. He caused them to go with great confidence, whilst the sea swallowed up their enemies. Accordingly, the Count spoke not a word to my prejudice, and leaving Tours that very day, the boat in which he was sunk in a storm, but his skill in swimming saved him. The sainted bishop simply confesses here to have practiced a bit of sorcery. Every mesmerizer knows the power of will during an intense desire bent on any particular subject. Whether in consequence of coincidence or otherwise, the opened verse suggested to his mind revenge by drowning. Passing the remainder of the day in deep concern, and possessed by this all-absorbing thought, the saint, it may be unconsciously, exercises his will on the subject, and thus, while imagining in the accident the hand of God, he simply becomes a sorcerer, exercising his magnetic will, which reacts on the person feared, and the Count barely escapes with his life. Were the accident decreed by God, the culprit would have been drowned, for a simple bath would not have altered his malevolent resolution against St. Gregory, had he been very intent on it. Furthermore, we find anathemas fulminated against this lottery of fate, and the Council of Varese, which forbids all ecclesiastics under pain of excommunication to perform that kind of divination or to pry into futurity by looking into any book or writing whatsoever. The same prohibition is pronounced at the Councils of Agda in 506, of Orleans in 511, in Auxerre in 595, and finally at the Council of Anaheim at 1110, the latter condemning sorcerers, witches, diviners, such as occasion death by magical operations, and who practiced fortune-telling by the holy book lots. and the complaint of the joint clergy against de Garland, their bishop at Orleans, and addressed to Pope Alexander III, concludes in this manner: "Let your apostolical hands put on strength to strip naked the iniquity of this man, that the curse prognosticated on the day of his consecration may overtake him. For the Gospels being opened on the altar according to custom, the first words were, and the young man, leaving his linen cloth, fled from them naked." Why then roast the lay magicians and consulter of books and canonize the ecclesiastics? Simply because the medieval as well as the modern phenomena manifested through laymen, whether produced through occult knowledge or happening independently, upset the claims of both the Catholic and Protestant churches to divine miracles. In the face of reiterated and unimpeachable evidence, it became impossible for the former to maintain successfully the assertion that seemingly miraculous manifestations by the good angels and God's direct intervention could be produced exclusively by her chosen ministers and holy saints. Neither could the Protestant well maintain on the same ground that miracles had ended with the apostolic ages. For whether of the same nature or not, the modern phenomena claimed close kinship with the biblical ones. The magnetists and healers of our century came into direct and open competition with the apostles. The Zouave Jacob of France had outrivaled the prophet Elijah in recalling to life persons who were seemingly dead, and Alexis, the somnambulist mentioned by Mr. Wallace in his work, was, by his lucidity, putting to shame apostles, prophets, and the sibyls of old. Since the burning of the last witch, the great revolution of France, so elaborately prepared by the League of the secret societies and their clever emissaries, had blown over Europe and awakened terror in the bosom of the clergy. It had, like a destroying hurricane, swept away in its course those best allies of the Church, the Roman Catholic aristocracy. A sure foundation was now laid for the right of individual opinion. The world was freed from ecclesiastical tyranny by opening an unobstructed path to Napoleon the Great, who had given the death blow to the Inquisition. This great slaughterhouse of the Christian Church, wherein she butchered, in the name of the Lamb, all of the sheep arbitrarily declared scurvy, was in ruins, and she found herself left to her own responsibility and resources. As long as the phenomena had appeared only sporadically, she had always felt herself powerful enough to repress the consequences. Superstition and belief in the devil were as strong as ever, and science had not yet dared to publicly measure her forces with those of supernatural religion. Meanwhile, the enemy had slowly but surely gained ground. All at once it broke out with an unexpected violence. Miracles began to appear in full daylight and passed from their mystic seclusion into the domain of natural law, where the profane hand of science was ready to strip off their sacerdotal mask. Still, for a time, the Church held her position, and with the powerful help of superstitious fear, checked the progress of the intruding force. But when, in succession, appeared mesmerists and somnambulists, reproducing the physical and mental phenomena of ecstasy, hitherto believed to be the special gift of saints, when the passion for the turning tables had reached in France and elsewhere its climax of fury, when the psychography, alleged spiritual, from a simple curiosity, had developed itself and settled into unabated interest, and finally ebbed into religious mysticism, when the echoes aroused by the first raps of Rochester crossing the oceans spread until they repercussed from nearly every corner of the world, and only then, the Latin Church was fully awakened to a sense of danger. Wonder, and wonder after wonder, was reported to have occurred in the spiritual circles and the lecture rooms of the mesmerists. The sick were healed, the blind made to see, the lame to walk, the deaf to hear. J.R. Newton in America and Duputet in France were healing the multitude without the slightest claim to divine intervention. The greatest discovery of Mesmer, which reveals to the earnest inquirer the mechanism of nature, mastered, as if by magical power, organic and inorganic bodies. But this was not the worst. A more direful calamity for the church occurred in the evocation from the upper and nether worlds of a multitude of spirits, whose private bearing and conversation gave the direct lie to the most cherished and profitable dogmas of the church. These spirits claimed to be the identical entities in a disembodied state of fathers, mothers, sons and daughters, friends and acquaintances of the persons viewing the weird phenomena. The devil seemed to have no objective existence, and this struck at the very foundation upon which the chair of St. Peter rested. Not a spirit except the mocking mannequins of Planchet would confess to the most distant relationship with the satanic majesty, or accredit him with the governorship of a single inch of territory. The clergy felt their prestige growing weaker every day, and they saw the people impatiently shaking off, in the broad daylight of truth, the dark veils with which they had been blindfolded for so many centuries. Then, finally, fortune, which previously had been on their side in the long-waged conflict between theology and science, deserted to their adversary. The help of the latter to the study of the occult side of nature was truly precious and timely, and science has unwittingly widened the once narrow path of the phenomena into a broad highway. Had not this conflict culminated at the nick of time, we might have seen reproduced on a miniature scale the disgraceful scenes of the episode of Salem witchcraft and the nuns of Loudun. As it was, the clergy were muzzled. And that is where we are going to wrap this one up for today. We will be back with the rest of this study tomorrow. I will be saying something else, but hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a series of very complicated topics. I understand that I hold some unconventional beliefs and that I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something I apologize for. When I told you at the beginning of this that there was two types of pastors, right? There was the pastors who are not able to understand the deeper mysteries, and there are those who are willfully hiding them from you and using them for their own benefit. This in particular is what I'm talking about. What is being described here at the end of this particular study has been that the church knows that these things are true. They know that it is possible. They know the means by which it is attainable, or at least a means by which it is attainable. Now, I hope to reveal through the course of this study, as I have in other studies, that it is possible for you to do miracles. I started with the fact that I have changed my own life by taking a little bit of measure of control of the Holy Spirit. The church, the Roman Catholic Church, did so as well. They just held it tight to their own clergy. They did not allow it to be dispensed. I am a dispenser of knowledge. That is what I do. I take these things and we discuss them in light of what is being brought to light by the text. I reveal things that have been revealed to me. I speculate on things that I have thought about but have not been revealed to me. And I try to make that distinction quite clear. I have used these things for myself. Now, I give full credit to God. He has directed me in how to do it. He has allowed me to do it, and it is through Him directly that I say that it is done. The spiritualists, breaking free of the control system, were not bound by that. And that is on them. That is not on me. I fully place it in the hands of the divine, the deity, God, He who created all that is. I serve fully and completely the God of creation. I serve with no hesitation whatsoever the positive forces of change in life. I talk about mental issues. I talk about depression and anxiety often because I have been through them. And when I say through them, I mean that I am on the other side of them. They no longer have any sway upon me because of the things that I talk about. Because I go directly to God, I don't get depressed. Do I still have them voices on occasion telling me the things that are not real? Yes. But I have learned to discern them and to understand that they are not real. It is an entity trying to influence me. I fully and firmly believe that. You don't have to. I'm not here to convince you. I'm here to tell you. I have taken a small measure of control of the electromagnetic forces of creation. I have affected change within my own body. I have affected change within the bodies of others who have consented to it. I have changed the weather on at least one occasion, and I have faced the repercussions of that, and that is why I am tentative to do things like that today. It is why I step so lightly, because my entry is a direct result of my manipulation of the energies. If you're unfamiliar with any of that, we're already rather long, but if you're unfamiliar with any of that, check out the origin story. We talk about that, I think, in that. And so, again, I'm not going to get into it as much here, but it is a truth. It is something that I am on record for, and you can watch for yourself. You can go back to my beginning videos, and you can even see it start to take place. Now, those videos in particular was back when I was doing politics. Right? I was trying to do the news, and you can go back on the alternatives, which, let's see, they are listed directly below me here, right? Rumble, BitChute, and Odyssey probably has most of those videos. But you can see the cyst come into my voice. You can see me lose it and me be confused and not understand what's going on. I went to the doctor, and they diagnosed the cyst. It was not supposed to go away by itself. It was an issue of contention in my house. My wife wanted me to have surgery, and I said no, that God would remove it when he was ready. He taught me how to do it, but I put my faith that he would do that. I put my faith that the things that he was showing me was the way to do that. And my goal, my mission, what I have committed to my God to do is to relay that to you. I have told him in no uncertain terms that if he showed me the way, I would show you, and that by showing you, I would do what I was called to do. I would accept the consequences of it, no matter what may come. I am sure there is somebody quite upset with me. They may pop up, and I'm going to let you know right now, I am allowed to defend myself, so if you get mad, you may not want to show up. If you want to discuss it in a calm, logical manner, we can do that. That is no problem. But don't bring force upon me, because I can retaliate with force. I am not restricted in the way that other people are. I do not visit force upon others arbitrarily. It is not something that I even desire to do, but I am allowed to defend myself. I understood fully going into this that I was going to receive severe resistance. I understand the reasons why. I know how hard it is to break from dogma. But I am here to tell you that the things I'm talking about are real. They are true. They are actual things. I have been able to talk to you this long in my voice. So hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment, and hopefully you're intrigued. Hopefully you want to learn some more, because that is the goal. I want to show as many people as possible that you can go directly to God, and that you can affect change in your own life. That these things that were held back from you by the control system are available. That the control systems were put in place to remove from you the ability to do these things. That is why we have these religions. It was formed to separate into those who know and those who don't. And most people don't want to know. They don't care. Most people will not make it this far in the video, but you did. And because you did, you want to know. And I'm here to show you. You are who I am here for. All the rest of them are welcome. They can come. But you want to know. And I am here for you. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, share, and a sub. Throw me a comment. If you agree or disagree, if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there is another work that you would like to see me work through in the manner that we are doing here, drop that in the comments as well. And if you really like what I'm doing, hit me with that super thanks, because I do not manifest money. To the crew,
Thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you were here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete, just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt's Take. Peace.